Okay. Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to our second series of online discussions at the World Movement for Democracy, the National Endowment for Democracy. This discussion is managed as a series of discussions by Harvard Youth Fellows. So I'm organizing these discussions to discuss issues of democracy and accountability. My name is Saeed Madadi. I'm a Harvard Fellow from Afghanistan. Um, we are very, very glad to have a very distinguished panel today here joining us to discuss a very interesting topic, which is the challenges of youth public participation and its potential ways to foster it. We have Anna Kuliberda from Bosnia and Herzegovina, an activist working in youth empowerment. Carolina Abrosky from Venezuela, who is a political activist and a political science professor at the university, and Lawrence Yellow from Liberia, who's currently a fellow at the Accountability Lab. You can watch this discussion live on Google Hangout and also on YouTube. You can contribute to this discussion using WMD Live and Move Democracy hashtags on Twitter. So make sure you send us comments and questions during the discussion. So we're starting the discussion by a very brief introduction of the topic that we're having here. All of us know that employment, education, and are from the very main concerns for youth across the world. And in developing countries, like the countries in Latin America, the countries in Africa, the countries in East Asia, these are from the very critical problems that youth faces. For our previous discussions that we had on March 20th, we discussed these challenges with different panelists from different regions of the world. But one of the main issues that we noticed was that their public participation is very critical for them. Some of the time, silencing youth voices might be very counterproductive for countries, both in terms of undermining stability, but also in terms of hindering the development of those countries. So in countries that have a very growing and rising youth population, like many of the countries in Africa, like my own country, Afghanistan, it's a very great concern because political institutions might not be so strong, and it's always a question how to involve youth voices in the public discourse and engage them in the public discussions, and what are its implications for stronger democracies, for building stronger institutions. So we're discussing these topics today. And I'd like to start by asking a question from Carolina, who's talking with us from Venezuela. That based on your experience, Carolina, what are some of the very main challenges that undermine youth public participation? You have been a political science professor, so and also a political activist working with youth, and we all know the critical situation that that your country is going through. So, what do you think? What are the problems that youth face in terms of their public participation?
Well, hi, Said. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I would also like to say hi to all the panelists. It's such a great honor to share this space with you all. Well, I already arrived to Venezuela, as you said. I was in Washington for 3 months studying at Georgetown University. And it's amazing to see how in such a short period of time, you can see how things have become worse in the country. Venezuela is a young country. The majority of our population is young people under 30 years old. So that means that we have a great potential in order to put this active, in terms of work population, into the economy of the country. What is happening in Venezuela right now? We have one of the highest inflations in the world. So that that makes that our conditions when we go to search for a job are very poor, since the money doesn't even get you to buy what you need to eat. And it's not an exaggeration. It's in fact what is happening right now in the country, where we're going through a very huge problem of scarcity due to the lack of production in all these years. And we're going through a very high level of insecurity in the streets. And that is something that is a problem that affects the youth so much, since Venezuela is in Caracas, its capital, is one of the most dangerous cities in the world right now. The levels of violence, of not only political violence but also insecurity, are very high, and that is something that is making our young population sometimes want to leave if they have the conditions, but also always try to move to the big cities where they can see the opportunities. The small towns in the deeper Venezuela have no opportunities of stable jobs, of stability, and in fact you see that young people travel half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours to the closest university if they got to be accepted in one public university, because to be accepted is very hard. And once they graduate, they're not able to develop their profession. So you see lots of lawyers, doctors working as taxi drivers or in the informal sectors of the economy, since they get more money from this activity than for the ones that they were studying and preparing to develop. So I think that is one of the major problems in our country, since to be economically independent is almost impossible in Venezuela. You cannot buy a house, you cannot rent a house, you cannot buy a car. It's very hard due to the high levels of inflation that we're going through. And I think that it's a situation that it's very particular and that other countries might have, but not at this level and at this point, where you go to the supermarket and at the next day you see that everything has raised the price a lot. And that is leading us to a high level of instability in the Venezuelan society right now.
Thank you, Carolina. But how about in terms of youth's public participation, in terms of their engagement in public discourses? I know Venezuela has a lot of problem with its government. It suppresses its people. Many of the activists who are working in Venezuela have hard time getting their voices heard, and the government is cracking down on the freedom of expression and freedom of association in those countries. And I'm seeing that many of these initiatives, demonstrations, are organized by youth communities in Venezuela. So in terms of their going out to streets, in terms of their association and discussing public issues, what are the main challenges to youth in Venezuela? What do you think?
Well, I think that we have like two extremes. Some of the young people in Venezuela are very disappointed and they don't want to participate, they don't care, they just want like to figure out how to move on and have an economic activity, and they don't participate so much in the public aspects. And we have the other extreme that are the ones that, due to this big crisis, decided that they have to participate and that they have to promote public discussion and that they want their voices to be taken into account. The thing is that we have a government that you might see that they have initiatives in speech in favor of the youth, but in fact, that's not true. And we can figure it out if we go to the national parliament and we ask for the annual budget, and we see that budget that the government is giving this year to repression of public manifestations is higher than the budget for the whole Ministry of Youth of the country. So there you see what's the priority of an authoritarian regime that doesn't want to take into consideration, or that doesn't take care of the young population that is a vast majority in the country. So I think that the bad situation and the crisis has a positive aspect, if we can call it that way. That is that some portion of the youth have been asking with a very strong voice that they must be taken into consideration. And we have something that is not very common in other countries, that is that in politics we have lots of young Venezuelans wanting to participate in public association, in politics, because we see that we have to build a country with our own hands and that our future is depending on our own actions. The thing is that the civil society in Venezuela, the freedom of association is very weak due to the political persecution, the political instability. And I think that as a civil society, we need to learn a lot of how to associate and try to grow with initiatives that are in favor of the population, that are not only depending of government or on politics. I think that we still have a lot to learn in that issue, but I think that the young population of Venezuela is actively participating and asking to be taken into consideration.
Thank you so much, Carolina, for that. Lawrence, you're coming from a pretty much different background than other of the panelists. So in Africa, one of the issues that I think might be very critical is some of the very cultural values that might hinder youth public participation, because there are some of the societies that in those contexts, for example, they owe a lot of respect to their elders, and this do you think this might assume this might be translated into broader policies, how the government make policies, or how in the broader general public youth are seen and how they're treated? So based on your experience from Africa, what do you think is the role of cultural constructions in hindering or empowering youth?
Thank you very much. I just want to say hello to everybody out there, and thanks to NED for having us. And to my fellow panelists, thank you for sharing this space. I mean, it's unique when you have discussion about Africa, you talk about customs, about the way others behave. But I mean, like Caroline described, most of those conditions are prevalent in Africa. We tend to look at policies and participation based on who's the others, who, for example, you have corruption. Youth want to really understand how that is, and you guys are on the television on certain shows. You understand that the government tend to squeeze those media not to let voices heard, and public participation is very crucial in that if most of the others are saying that this is how the culture of corruption should be, because governance in Africa is a tricky factor. People tend to mix it with culture. Some of them are very good people. So,
Lawrence, we're hearing your voice breaking out.
If you come to the national stage,
do you hear us, Lawrence? I guess your voice is breaking out, and we really couldn't get the last part that you're talking about.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's pretty clear. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, we're hearing you, Lawrence. Please go ahead.
what I was saying has
We're losing your
to
voice,
do
Lawrence,
with
unfortunately.
the way people display politics in, say, uh, hello?
Um, Hello, Lawrence. Do you hear us clearly?
Can you hear me?
We're hearing you now, right? But when you're speaking about the topic, you're breaking out. Okay. Now I think it's good.
Okay. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, please.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you,
Okay.
Lawrence. Please go ahead.
The way others, some of the discussion are, yeah, some of the discussions are very, very critical to growth of young people. I mean, and I think it is not good for a lot of young people to get on the street because our governments are cruel in the way they behave to people. They tell us freedom of speech in their speeches, in their actions is totally different. They tell you get, oh, we give you this, we'll give you that, but if you get on the street to activate for what is right, they get on the street with guns and shoot young people, like you saw in January in DRC. And in Liberia, people get on the street, they don't shoot you live, but what they do to you is they kind of put police on the road, and the police really beat them up because this is the only way our elders sometimes try to show that they're not people. So most of the challenges are the way policies are structured. They don't want young people to get their voices heard, and and the other side of the story has to do with uh, what are we doing as young people? Should we also get on the air and start insulting people? Should we get on the media and be insulting people because they're old? They're not giving us the chance to participate? I think no. I think what we should do is find creative ways around how to solve some of these problems. We can use, if we're professionals and culture of the same area, telling them these are what we believe and these are the things that we think that are not good, and then we can lay out to them. But if not, what we're going to be happening is they're going to be beating us, they're going to be killing us, they're going to be imprisoning most of us because in Liberia, I mean, our president has been really praised globally, but internally she has no control over how things are being done and things are being conducted. You imprison media practitioners because they're saying what is true, and you can come down on corruption. Police are so corrupt in the country that every part of the street they're taking money from everybody, and that is so wrong. So some of the challenges are how can you allow us to use the space without necessarily suppressing us? And some of these things are not because it is made in the culture, but these are people who are just greedy for power and they're using the power against the young people.
So do
It's
you
just
think
not
those values do not
just
have any rule?
about the young people, but they're using the power against the population. So it's just a power display, basically, and not different.
Okay. Thank you, Lawrence. Anna, you've been working not only in Bosnia but also in some of other countries in the Balkans, and these are some very young democracies. Some of them have very good experiences of building these democratic institutions. Some of them had very dark or turbulent past history of ethnic conflict or other issues related to wars. But now some of these countries are doing a very good job in terms of empowering democratic institutions. So what do you think, what are the effects or the rule of institutional sustainability and the aftermath of conflict on youth participation? Do you think in younger democracies it's harder to include youth voices in the public discourse? Do you think conflict plays a critical role in how we engage youth when we try to build democracies?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. First, let me thank you very much for invitation and for being here in this very interesting panel so far. I learned a lot, yet it's like 10 minutes. That's a very good question about building institutions after the war. Mm-hmm. But first, let me the youngest state in the Western Balkan region is Kosovo, and they actually have the most enthusiasm towards building democratic institutions and towards being open regarding youth participation, especially when it comes to employment and building stable market. And I must say, like, I meet a lot of young people from Kosovo, and they very much involved. It's the youngest society in Europe, and they really on the streets. Everybody can see how young is this society, and how encouraging it is. Of course, the unemployment is very high, but on the other hand, Kosovo is investing a lot in new technologies and like high expertise. So I think there is hope, although the society is really poor. On the other hand, we have 20 years after finishing the war in Bosnia, with the history of ethnic cleansings, and I must say the participation of young people is very, very bad, and young people that even don't remember the war, they have no access to public participation of any kind, or even public discourse. Last year in February, we had huge protests in bigger parts of the country, and those protests led to burning public, like regional government buildings, and by burning I mean like really burning it to the ground almost. And it was mostly young people, young men, but not only. I saw girls bringing the stones for the boys to throw, and it was like the voice of youth, the only voice of youth that could be heard. The problem in Bosnia is a very, very complicated system that was built in order to secure equal access to power to ethnic groups, but not to other groups. And by other groups, I mean different groups of people, including young people. So the ethnic groups, they have good access to power, good access to media, but the young people of any ethnicity, they're lacking it very, very much. And this brings a lot of depression, I must say. I don't know a young person in Bosnia that doesn't want to leave from the country, and it's probably very similar to Venezuela case. And that is so depressing. Since I'm not from Bosnia originally, I'm being asked about why do I want to be here, just because I love the country, with such a disappointment on one side, and on the other side with a very big surprise. So it's a very sad situation, I think. In Serbia, the situation is a bit different. The new like last year elected prime minister, he's he's, I think, reasonably young. He's 40 something, but already he has this very authoritarian approach to politics, especially to media and to social media. So that doesn't give hope as well. And I think that the old institutions, and it's rather the culture that kind of doesn't see youth participation as important one. There was a Ministry of Youth in Venezuela mentioned. There is no Ministry of Youth anywhere here, and that's probably one of the problems. And I must say that the governments here are doing everything in order to kind of stop young people to participate, also trying to regulate social media and internet, the only media that is more or less free.
Okay. So just a follow-up question. So after the conflict, do you think youth communities are still divided on those ethnic lines that the war was based on, or they think more nationally about all the country? And how do you think that affects the general public discourse?
So right now, young people were going to school when after the war. So the school program was affected by politics in like extreme extent. There are so-called two schools under one roof in many cities in Bosnia and Herzegovina that are dividing ethnically or religiously dividing groups of young people, and they don't meet. And there was just recently TV show when a Croat boy from Mostar. Mostar is divided between Croats and Bosniaks, Muslim ethnicity of the country, and he actually said, and he was like 17 or 18, and he said that he never talked with a Bosnian person. So it's, and they live in the same city. So I think that the war, and especially the politics after the war of sustaining the division, because it's much easier to rule when the country is divided, that is still on. There is the generation of 30 years old, and they remember Yugoslavia. They remember the country before the war, and they are much more open towards each other. However, those people that are like 17, 24, they're being differently formatted. And I must say the school has a huge influence on public discourse.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was very, very interesting. How youth are divided more than their previous generations after the conflict. One of the issues that you very rightly pointed out was the role of social media and how some of the countries and some of the governments feel threatened through activities that are organized through social media. Carolina has been a political activist in Venezuela, and she has been organizing youth communities for a political party as a youth coordinator. So, Carolina, from your own experience in Venezuela, how can we really engage youth in a constructive way to have more vibrant and more engaging public discourse and public spaces, to empower them to contribute to better governance, to more transparent systems? So what does your experience of working in Venezuela tell us?
Well, I think that it's very hard in this situation that we're going through right now, since, as I said, most of the youth here in Venezuela are like losing hope, are like very negative in the sense they feel like they are not going to go through this crisis in the short period of time, and they are like very desperate looking for other options. But I think that once you start getting successful examples of public policies starting from localities, I mean from municipalities, instead of the national level that nowadays is very critical, I think that you can feel and you can see how the youth are going to start feeling empowered. And that is something that we have been working on in those municipalities where we have been able to talk to the local government to promote initiatives that promote sport, that try to generate opportunities for a first job, that try to get options of scholarships in order to go to college or to any institution where you can study and professionalize. And I think that that is something that really empowers. And also with another resource that we have that is very powerful here in Venezuela, also as some of you mentioned, is that the internet and the social media, Twitter, for example, as a window of freedom of expression, and internet in general. The problem is that there are some areas in Venezuela where we don't have access to these tools, and where you see that people don't understand about Facebook, Twitter, or any other social windows that may connect them with the rest of the world, because we have a lack of infrastructure and internet services in those areas. But still, I think that the Venezuelan youth population is very active in social media, and that we have been a voice that has been able to tell the world what is happening in our country. And that is something that empowers, because you don't need a huge network television to call you for an interview, or you don't need a famous reporter to come and ask you about your opinion. You yourself, with your account through internet, are the own voice that is going to tell the world what is happening by recording a video, by posting a photo, or by just telling your experience. And I think that has been very, very powerful to put in trending topics, for example, and show the world what is really happening in Venezuela in this moment. So I think that there are several initiatives through sport, through education, through the promotion of health, through the promotion of technology that might empower us, even due the hard circumstances, to allow us to participate, to let our voice be heard, and to be part of the change we need, and not only they're expecting someone to come and try to change the reality. If we associate, if we build a network that goes beyond the political differences and the cultural differences and any difference we might have, we are becoming, I think, a stronger youth, more conscious about the present and about the future. And I think that even when we're going through a very severe crisis, that is something very positive. That you have in Venezuela people from 18, 20, 22 years thinking about a country. That is something that sometimes when you have everything, you don't figure out what is your neighbor lacking of, or what is the problem of another community. And I think that the Venezuelan youth, in that sense, is very conscious and very active.
Thank you, Carolina. So, in the parts of the country that people do not have access to internet, it's clear that they have a lot of problem connecting to the world and using social media and other online platforms for their work. But we're hearing every day that the government is cracking down on activists, and they're limiting social media access. They're slowing down the speed of the internet, so to make it harder for activists to use social media. So how do you think that affects youth activism in Venezuela, and what are, for example, the ways to make that better, or what are the other options if social media gets problematic for youth communities?
Yeah, that's true, and that's a fact here in the country. We have seen sometimes there are days that you don't have internet in the whole country because internet is facing a problem or something. So it's like very suspicious, and you see how they they put like very slow the connection, or that it's very hard to get access to. But still, there are always ways. And here, when I was in Washington, I got the opportunity to meet with Joanny Sanchez. She's a famous Cuban blogger, and she has been a voice that could bypass all these government controls in Cuba, which is even stronger than in Venezuela. And she got her voice to be heard. And she was telling us, for example, how she tweets blind because she doesn't get to see what she's tweeting, but she puts a text message to a phone in Twitter. I don't know exactly how it goes, but what I want to say with this is that in this world where we are so interconnected, where technology is such a great tool in order to empower people and to let voices be heard, it's very strong for a government to actually try to silence what is happening in a country. And in fact, in such a country as Venezuela, where the population is very active and very contestatory and trying to protest against everything that we are thinking that it's not right. So even when the government puts controls, and they also have this communication system where they position trending topics that are not true, and you see that there is no people tweeting, but computers tweeting for them, and you see that they hire people in order just to manage a fake Twitter and Facebook accounts. You see that there is some new interaction, and that you also have to be very careful, because what you read in social media is not always true, and it's very it's like a very delicate situation where you have to confirm, and you have to try to be sure that the source you are reading is real, and it's not, for example, a picture from a conflict in other countries. There were people, for example, fake accounts tweeting with fake pictures of the Arab Spring when last year the conflict in Venezuela. And that is something that is very problematic, since then you start thinking that the pictures that are true are also not true, because you have people confusing, and you have people trying to make a situation be misunderstood. So I think that we, as our reporters to the world, have to be very responsible with the message we put in internet. And that is something I think that the Venezuelan youth has been learning a lot, since we value so much these windows, and we know that we need to have the authority and the recognition in order to the world see what is truly happening in Venezuela. So I think that we are very, in a majority, very responsible with the messages that we post, and very careful with the messages that we put, since we have no other networks or means of communication, and we are the own windows to the world, so we're very careful with that.
Thank you. Lawrence, from your own experience in Africa, how do you see social media? Is it also widely used for public reasons, for organizing youth communities? How much African youth use social media, both in terms of mobilizing themselves and getting together, but also in terms of getting their message across and advocating for what they're working on?
Thank you very much. I think what we use for Facebook a lot. Before I talk about how that happens, I want to also emphasize that if young people have been given space to operate and hear their voice, being responsible and on how to get that information out is most important, because whatever you say, whatever you do, it goes a long way in picturing the true scenario to the world. And I'm going to lift a few things from Liberia, and I'm going to talk a little bit on Ghana and compare the differences in that. If you see in Liberia, you see the war that was fought for 14 years created a huge gap between an educated few and a hugely uh, um, underprivileged young people, from where you find still people in college for first degree, still 40, 45 years old. And that is a huge problem for the growth of a country. So you find out most people using social media, especially Facebook, are using negative words a lot. Their, their minds are more negative, and there are a lot of focus of the issue is being left out, and people only focus on insults a lot. And because Facebook is not, internet as a whole is not all over the country, you find out that radio broadcast, which is the traditional way, is what people use. And there are a lot of talk shows throughout the day in the country, and people text a lot. I mean, the mobile population is high. People call on the shows and make their points heard. But you see, the government has a unique way of preaching the politics of confusion. And that politics have other young people, they pay them, and they call into the show to paint a wrong picture about what is happening. And the same way they paid some of those young people get on Facebook and just to write information or type things that are absolutely not true. The reason is once the young people go against each other, the government then, if you go to Ghana, that's quite different. Ghana has a lot of issues, but Ghana, the social media, I mean, Twitter, people use Twitter a lot. People also use Facebook a lot. They use Facebook for organizing a lot of events as well. But you know, Ghana has this power outage, which is a distribution of electricity in the country. And a lot of young people talk about that as well. There are a lot of talk shows as well. But it is more responsible in the language that is used and savor in the way they carry that out. I'm not suggesting this to mean that if you say things that are true and use the right language is not the right way to go. But if you keep insulting and keep talking negative things that are not really true, this is how the African society is going to view it. They start focusing more on they're older than you, that's what we were talking about earlier, and then why are you insulting your elders, rather than why are you saying that which is true. So with the emergence of Facebook, I mean, some of the pictures that are posted, like Caroline said, and if you check like discussing Liberia, if you just go to that Facebook page, some things are happening in other countries, and I just posted it, and people are just saying completely, and we know that's not true. And sometimes they post a car and an accident happened in Guinea, they post it in Liberia, and we read the lesson plate and go like, no, that plate says Guinea. Why are you posting that for Liberia? I mean, these are critical ways people are abusing the space. What I also want to say is the politics of advocacy, I think, should have a twist in it a little bit. People should be more positive. I mean, the government doesn't necessarily do everything wrong. Equally so, when they do the wrong thing, we should say which is true. I think we should be factual in our information to the world that paints the right picture of the country, that paints the right picture of the situation in the country. Then people wouldn't live in denial. Traditionally, the internet in many countries in Africa are really restricted to big cities, urban cities, and not to villages. So young people in those villages are deprived of hearing their voices. But one way to get their voices heard is through the radio. But guess what? The funny thing is the radio also comes in English. And some of those villages, they don't speak English. Even if it comes in French, they don't speak French. So you have to reduce it into their local language so that their voices can be heard. So because we have different dialects, different ethnic groups, and the customs in those areas display, so we have to also change some of these programs that we. Anytime I hear youth empowerment, I'm really careful to discuss what that empowerment truly is. Are we just giving them in Africa to give a lot of vocational education? Vocational education truly empower young people to be able to contribute to the future of their country. those are critical questions that need to be answered, which with the time I've been working across the region, West Africa, it's difficult to really put your hands on that. Do they need university education? They need a mix of that. But mostly the emphasis of youth empowerment goes to girls' child education, to what the best way to go. I think we should not just get voices, also occasion take them to Great Britain, take them to other places and give them education, which some of them will not come back anymore, and they will stay, thereby depleting the minds of the those are some of the challenges. So when they come on this side, when they write to friends, who some of them, because they need assistance from them, will give them wrong information, and they just write those.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. Before we come back to you for the next questions, just to get Anna's perspective on the role of social media, because Anna, you also have been working on initiatives to engage youth in using social media in the Balkans. Lawrence?
Is it me breaking or Lawrence still?
No, it's Lawrence breaking out.
Hear some of these things. So I think you contextualize with this.
Okay. Thank you, Lawrence. So before we come back to you for the next question, just wanted to have Anna's perspective, because she has also been involved in social media activities and promoting the use of social media for youth communities in the Balkans. So Anna, what is your perspective? How do you think social media can help youth mobilize themselves and also get their message across? And how serious is the role of such a very unconventional platform like Facebook or Twitter?
Well, first of all, the penetration of internet and social media in the Balkans is really, really high, and the access to internet, I think, is the highest among the countries we're speaking today about. However, the internet is not widely used for political issues or public participation issues, maybe besides expressing unhappiness of the situation. When there is something happening, I mean, like there are protests or there were floods just last year in like most of the countries, then the social media are burning with information. However, there is a non-systematic approach to spreading the news with or the voice of youth. Somehow those voices are not that visible. Very few use Twitter. The Twitter population in the Balkans is probably very, very small. The interesting part, it's very difficult from what Lawrence was saying. We have one language, mostly, more or less. All the countries are able to understand each other very well. And yet we're still not very discussing about public life, about the international, regional public life, and we're very separate. We stayed in our country silos. On the other hand, I think calling Facebook unconventional is a bit old-fashioned right now, because even the governments and important politicians, they recognize it very well by also, for example, just recently in a part of Bosnia and Herzegovina called Republika Srpska. It's like second part, one part of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. They named social media and in general internet also as public space. So it means that when there is any violence or something against public order happening, it means that some restriction, as like in offline, might have been applied towards people acting against the government or against public order, let's say. That's a very powerful tool for the government, and I think that also means that the government recognizes right now what is the danger behind social media. On the other hand, in Serbia, after the floods, when there was a lot of complaints on the social media, people were being asked to come for informative conversation with the police. So this voice, if there is any, is very much observed by authorities. And even though it doesn't happen often, they already are being kind of threatened. So that puts any activism online a bit into the context of the danger as well.
Thank you so much. Those are some of the very, very critical issues about social media that you all mentioned. The fact that we need to be more careful about its use, how it will be more accepted in society, how the news will be genuine or not, and the fact that if the government accepts it as a public space, what will be the drawbacks. Lawrence, I know you've been involved in promoting accountability and transparency in Africa, and you've been trying to use some of the very creative ways to do it, like using smartphones, using music, using theater maybe. So from your own experience, how can these things, these participatory arts, for example, music and theater, can help youth communities to engage in public discussions and represent themselves in the broader discourse?
Young people really, we like to express ourselves. The youth love to enjoy whatever they do, instruments and tools that they know how to use better, and let them use it. For example, music. If you who are youth and young people to express whatever they see happening in their communities, celebrities, they have followers, and
Lawrence, your voice is
influence.
I'm not hearing you very properly well.
Followers, if they tend to say good things to their followers. Music has a rhythm that gets beyond just your ending, that goes deeper in.
Lawrence?
Are you hearing me now?
Your voice is breaking out. We're not hearing you properly. We're
Okay,
really not understanding what you're talking.
Are you hearing me now?
Hello?
That's technology. Are you hearing me?
Yes. Now it's much better. Yes. Please continue.
Okay. Okay. So using arts, just using mirrors and drawing things on a board. The thing is, most of the society in Africa are less reading oriented. There's a lot of papers a lot of things. People wouldn't read. They don't. So then, so if you write things, drawings, do movies, have motion pictures, watch from. The thing is, these things are going across. They can get a music in just in their players' home, and they can listen to them, and it tends to influence their life. And whilst we do these little projects, that we look for young voices are not heard expression. So we go to community for the film school, for example. We go and pick up, uh, take young ladies, young boys, and then enroll them into the film school, and then allow them to express what accountability issues you have in your community. How can you use your phone, your phone to just record those things? For example, like I was sharing, and I like to share with other people. If police is receiving bribe on the road or harassing people on the road, if you took a real big camera to just film them, they will stop because they see those cameras, they'll stop. But if you have your phone and you videotape that and you are able to edit it and then show that documentary to policymakers, is it going to help raise discussion around it, and then it helps the nation move into a better good. These are just ways that we get people to get their voices heard and make things happen.
Thank you. So using a smartphone and these platforms might look very much easier than art, for example, because with smartphone it's easy to tell people to take pictures of things that they see is going wrong, and they can just advocate for them in the government. But how really can you use music and art that are, as you said, a source of enjoyment and for the people? How can you use that for some of the, for example, political things, or for engaging youth in public discussions? How can you discuss serious public issues through music and art?
Yeah, I mean, like for example, in the country we work with over, right? And one thing we do is we work with most of the real vocal voices, and what he does, a lot of social consciousness in his music, and talk about things that happen. And then there is one music that they made, most of them they made, and it's called pot boiling. Pot boiling means like, okay, some people are stealing and they're just eating the money, and other people just don't have to eat. If afraid to eat, and be eating. So those kind of music, like he talk about justice, that those kind of music. And the thing about those music, when we do it, when those guys do the music, there's always a discussion. In Liberia, we have something called the tea shop. And in those tea shop, these guys make this kind of music. The tea shop lecturers that meet at those tea shop by the close of the day, and they sit down and there's a discussion around the newest music that is being raised. Are the things these guys talking about really happening? And people start having this discussion around them. And sometimes too, we ourselves do something called friend raiser. We bring people around to just have this discussion around, bring some of these artists and talk about the music and to use this music. So, for example, he's been used as the government use him for ambassadorship for that, and he goes around raising discussion about young people because he's a male, talking about stop rape, and it's not a good thing. Tend to listen, and it's helping keep the conversation going. For arts, for example, we just draw things on the board, and then leave it, and then people raise discussion around it. We get young people in school, and then as they draw things, for example, doing the Ebola, we draw an Ebola mirror, and people just look at it. It's an educated tools, but it's a tools to also get people what is happening in the country. The thing is, they keep go away, last for a longer time, and keep the discussion going. And policy makers are really listening to these little tools. And the thing about when you talk about the iPhone or the video, we get policy makers listening in something we call the 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 film festival. We bring policy makers in the country to just watch the film that has been produced for the particular school period.
Mm-hmm. Lawrence? Do you hear us, Lawrence? I think just again had some issues with the connection. So before we which I'll ask from Carolina, this discussion is now live on Google Plus and YouTube, and those who are watching can contribute to the discussion by using YWMD Live in Twitter to ask questions and offer us comments. Carolina, you are in a very unique position to talk about this because as a university professor, you're studying political institutions, you're studying state building and how democracies are built, but at the very same time you're working in a very critical country that people are struggling to bring in accountability, to bring about democracy, and for example, to fight an authoritarian government. So what do you think, what is the role of youth participation in empowering democracy and helping building responsive governance? What will be the extra benefit of us if we engage more youth voices in the public discussions? Will we have better democracies? Will we have more accountable governments?
Yes, well, I think that participating is the only option we have since we have to build a country by our own hands. Right now, we have like nothing to lose and a lot to win. And once you start participating and getting people involved, and that you see that you can have the satisfaction of feeling that you are part of the change a country in crisis needs, that is very powerful, and that it motivates you to go on even when the hard circumstances are going through. I also believe that it is very important for us, what you were mentioning before about art and music. Sometimes in the middle of so many huge problems, we don't give like the importance to this cultural, artistic aspect. And I think it's very powerful to involve young people in the public discussion. And as I was in Washington, we get to have a meeting with the Inter-American Development Bank, and they talked to us about something that really impressed me and that I'm bringing to Venezuela with me, which is the orange economy. I mean, if you think about it, artistic expressions or musicals, sometimes if you get the top 10 musicals of the world, the ones that got more sales, you see that they get to get money more than even very small countries. So that's that's a powerful instrument that we have to promote in order for the youth to be involved and to participate. I encourage you to read about the orange economy and to think about it as a possibility of having this sort of activities to promote the youth of our countries that are facing sometimes very hard times, that they don't want to get directly involved in politics or in any other of civic associations. But if you bring music to the table, if you bring theater to the table, if you bring sport to the table, that is something that young people won't say no to, because that is something that gets to make you grow as a person, that makes you get into know with other people your age, to have friends, to associate, to make a network, to be part of something. In the big crisis that my country is facing right now, I think that the most harmful thing is that some young people feel that they don't belong and that no one takes care of them. So if we take these aspects into consideration and we use them in order to empower and to promote participation in any sort of way, and then try to bring it to the public scenario, we would be winning a lot. So I think that is one of the most impressive and satisfactory learnings I'm bringing from Washington. The opportunity to know and to read about this orange economy that I have never the opportunity to think about us. And I think it's very important to empower people and to make them have this sense of belonging that is so needed nowadays in my country.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up question, what exactly role can you play in terms of contributing to more accountable governments or a better public space? For example, how do you see the government
Eh,
institutions, employees? Does it make it less prone to corruption, or so which one do you think plays a more important role, the people or the institutions? And if you think having more younger generation of workers can help that to work better?
So I think that we have been victims of corruption.
Carolina?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
I think we're having a. Okay, perfect.
Yes,
Uh, I think
please go
this
ahead.
generation has been victim of corruption. We see how a government that has 15 years in power, that is like almost two generations, with the highest oil prices ever in the world, uh, they didn't know how to manage that and how to translate that economic growth into the benefit of the population. So we have seen the most corrupt government in the history of Venezuela, and I think this generation is a victim of that. So when we participate in politics, when we participate in the public sphere, when we participate in order to serve to other people, in most of the times when we do that, we're not gaining everything. We're investing time. We're risking our life. We're investing valuable time that we're not gonna get back, and that is the best years of our lives invested in trying to build something better for the future. So when you participate because you believe and not because you are getting something, I mean, material or money. No, you just do that because you need that. You have no other choice and that you have no other option. Then I think that we have a very good guarantee that when we finally get into power, in order to get to the spaces where we can make and manage huge possibilities of transformation, once we get there, we have to stick to those values, to remember how hard it was and to remember that the mistakes of previous generations were very cost and very expensive for us, for our present, for our generation. So I think in that sacrifice we're making, we have a very good guarantee that once we get there, we cannot make the same mistakes that previous Venezuelans made when they got into power. Having to implement policies that were very harmful for a whole population of a country. And I think that might sound very like dreamful and very innocent in some way, but when you see that you share this fight, to put in some, I don't like the word fight, but to share this way, this strong and very hard path with people that are your same age and that understand that it has very hard, I think there we have a guarantee that inspires us and that is going to make us try to truly go against corruption and those things that had taken the country into the place where it is right now.
Thank you. Anna, in the Balkans, one of the countries that went into very serious crisis was close to Bosnia was Ukraine, which still has a lot of problems with the recent crisis. And it's so interesting because the crisis was both managed through social media, but also it was related to government issues and how the government treated its citizens. So do you think engaging more youth voices in the public discourse help us handle reforms more easily? For example, if there's a problem in the government and you engage more youth voices, is it less prone to being violent? Is it easier for the government to handle reforms if there are more youth voices engaged?
I think that well, Ukrainian example is actually a very interesting one because in 2004 it was mostly the Orange Revolution was mostly done by young people like Maidan. So the camp back then in the same place when we had it just recently was done by very young people, and who after that tried to join public life by establishing NGOs or having new parties even, and then after 10 years nothing changed, and that's a very sad conclusion of the story, that again the revolution was kind of hacked by old powers. And definitely the young voice wasn't included at all. The second part of your question, Said, is I have doubts actually about only including youth voices. I think that the problem with governance in general is that managing voices and actually listening to voices of different groups, including young people, is a skill that very few governments has. And that brings, because it's a skill, it comes with the political will, but it's a skill. It's a technology that you use. I mean, not new technology, but like there is a technique for listening well. It's like listening to a friend and being able to receive critique. And if that happens, I think this is a very good and promising step for creating more favorable conditions for reforms. If the government is actually willing to listen to people, to young people as well, that probably brings in the second step the reforms and the ability to change something in the country. And then yes, I believe young people can be engine for reforms and true social and economical as well changes in society. because they usually still have some hope. So there is a motivation and there is still strength there. However, without true political will, democratic institutions are kind of not prepared to be participatory democratic institutions right now. Like, they're very old-fashioned in this regard. So only democracy that lies only in elections, I think, is not enough for now, because as we can see in the Balkans and in Ukraine and a bit in Europe, almost everywhere, that old parties, because of how the system is created and is designed, are still very, very strong and much stronger than any informal movement. And we can come back to Occupy movement that failed. So that comes with political will, and then that might really help in changing societies and political reality.
Thank you, Anna. Lawrence, what are your thoughts on how engaging more youth communities can help us have more peaceful transitions to democracy and have easier ways of handling reforms?
Okay. I think democracy shouldn't just be electoral. It shouldn't just be because we won elections, so we say, okay, turnouts should be smooth. Democracy should be an institution and should be respect for the rule of laws and also respect for the powers that have been placed there by the people. It is a balanced equation, both from citizens' responsibility and also government's responsibility and accountability as well. So when it comes to people turning in powers, I think constitutions are made for it to be respected as a guiding tool to lead the country into a more stable, responsible, and governed way. But where leaders become more autocratic and greedy for power, and they want to cleave to it, either directly or indirectly. Directly, when they want to change the constitution to make 3 terms in Eastern Africa, Rwanda, and Uganda, and then these guys want 3 terms. Burundi is the hottest right now, and it could be a good recipe for disaster in that region, because if you follow the Rwandan history well, you know that these conflicts started in Burundi, and we don't want Burundi to go in that way again. But that is more not ready to hold government accountable. And I think getting on the street, this is what I think about getting on the street, and when using youth to get on the street to protest, and they will be killed by these irresponsible leaders. We could use the social media. We could use our connections to organizations like NED, organizations like Transparency International and Amnesty, to get the voices heard, giving correct information. If we give the right information to them, they can use those information to lobby powerful countries like the US, Britain, and other countries. When I say indirectly holding to power, if a president wants to finish the 2nd term constitutionally and resign, but trying to push someone and rig election in that person's favor, that is also very irresponsible, and that I see sometimes happen in other countries. But like happened recently in Nigeria, I think it's more responsible. People should look at the Nigerian scenario of a smooth election. So it is not just about the election, it's about the intention of the president in power to respect the rule of law and the will of the people. So young people need to be more responsible in getting in the space, hearing their voices, and contributing meaningfully with the kind of literature they write. I mean, every time I talk more towards accountability in Africa, I'm pushed to talk about how we read, because we don't read a lot in Africa, and the reading population is very small. So it is good to also translate these messages into a short video, and Facebook and other social media should be able to not charge people for certain content of loading those good videos onto the web, because if you start to charge, and then you will not get really good content, because if it is 3 minutes, a true vital information in an African sense cannot go in 3 minutes. It could go in like 7 to 10 minutes. But Facebook would not want to get 7, 10 minutes until you can pay. So organizations like NED should also be doing these intervention on behalf of these advocates that want to put out a very good, reliable, authentic video to that length. If we can try to do things like that, then we can know that democratic space is not just about elections, but also about citizen responsibility and government accountability and responsibility.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. Carolina, you heard Lawrence talking about how, and Anna also mentioned that democracy being only about elections and voting for a public official to be in an office is not enough, and we have to have accountability and citizenry responsibility also. Connecting to that, what's happening now in Venezuela, it's also a struggle. It's also a way of seeing how Venezuelan citizens are feeling responsibility for their own country, youth communities in particular, and it's also how they are trying to hold their government accountable into account. But Venezuela, though, have had very horrible situation in the recent months and year, it has not yet get even closer to what really happened in the Middle East in terms of the Arab Spring or in Ukraine. So what do you think, what is the reason that Venezuela is still pretty controllable in terms of how the people manage their relation to the government? Do you think is it because there are a lot of these youth organizations active and they don't want to go violent?
Yes, well, I think that the Venezuelan population has been very peaceful, and we are not used to violent episodes, and we don't have in our history since the independence. We don't have a like history of wars, of internal conflict, or civil wars. But still, I think that I share a lot what Lawrence was saying about democracy not only being elections, and I think that's the problem in Venezuela, in fact. Why? Because Nicolás Maduro, he won the elections. He won the elections with, taking abuse of the public things in order to get that, to win, to get into power, and elections were not transparent. They were not in equal conditions, but he won. So when you see, oh, people elected him, and that's the reason why that is a democracy, I think that it's very vague as an argument, because democracy is not only about elections. It's about respect of minorities, respect of human rights, respect of the system of political parties. It's also about the respect of freedom of expression. And if you see that in that equation, in Venezuela you have elections that are very polemic, but all the other aspects and variables of that equation, you don't have them. And I think that that is very, that's an issue that we have to take into consideration when we talk about Venezuela, because it might not be a dictatorship, but it's not also a democracy. And that is something that the youth in Venezuela have clear, and I think our participation has been always pacific, and as a political activist, I want it to remain in that way, because I don't think a violent episode is going to help us in the present or in the future. I think that we can raise our voices in a pacific way, and we can unite and build a strong network. And I think that in the Arab Spring, you had some sort of episodes that we might take into consideration in order to learn how the society was able to organize and to make their voices be heard. We always have been against violence. What happened last year in Venezuela and what has been happening this year is something we regret, we reject, we don't approve at all these violent groups that might want to take power by force, because we believe in democracy, and when you believe in something, you cannot risk it or put it aside in order to fight for it. If we believe in democracy, we're sticking to the democratic way, even when the government won't. And that I think that it's something that it's possible to achieve. And in the region, we have a huge example that inspires us so much. That is Chile, when they got to win the elections against Pinochet, who was the dictator of the country. The people organized, the people took to the street a message that was strong. And I think that in Venezuela right now, we have a condition where people are not happy. People are not supporting the government as a majority. And if we organize and we build an alternative that it's not only opposition, but a democratic alternative to the country, and we can speak it out loud. And as Anna was saying, it's not only about youth. It's about youth taking into consideration, but not only young people. I mean, we have experienced older people that know how to manage the country and that are also necessary in order to incorporate and to bring us to the public scenario, so that we might be able to be part of the change that we are living right now.
Thank you, Carolina. Just as the very last question, I'll ask Anna. Carolina also said it's not only about youth, but it's also about the whole community and the older generation who might have other better experience. So it should be a cooperative work between all. We have just received a question from our audience. Somebody has asked in Twitter that, do you think youth are independent enough to influence the governing or the government? Anna?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. Thank you for this question. I think that actually that brings the question, who do we consider youth? But I was working with people from 12 years old. I would consider youth as not children from, say, 13, 15 till 30, let's say. And I think that this group, when properly asked for voice, this group really knows what is needed. They may not know philosophy of governing the country, but they might have very, very good ideas, and the responsibility lies on the side of people that are in power. The public participation doesn't necessarily mean being in power. So that's not equal. However, I think that more young people would bring certain shift in dynamics, maybe less talking, more doing, because just young people are that energetic. But I think that they're definitely ready to participate.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you all for your contribution, for the very unique perspectives that you brought us today on the table. I'm sure as much as I learned from this discussion, our audience who are watching us all across the world had a very interesting discussions. We discussed a lot of issues, very critical points, and I'm glad that you all participated to contribute those very unique perspectives from your own experience of working in very diverse and different environments across the world. So thank you all so much, and thank you to those who watched us today live. I hope you really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you.